actually don't even have to agree on most things, but we need to find where we do agree. So in Colorado, about 4 years ago, we all agreed that we needed more opportunities for kids who had to go to out-of-home placement to be in a home as close to their family as possible, as close to ethnicity, as close geography, just as close to their community, their school. And so some of you may have done this in your state too. We started working on diligent recruiting. And so that was our common agenda. We talked about that every 3 months. We even had some shared measurements. We decided that the measurement was the same number of foster families in a zip code as there were kids going into out-of-home placement from that zip code. So we were feeling pretty good about this. And we had our quarterly meetings, so that was good. Point 3 covered. What was the point 3? That was point 4. Continuous communication, we had that. We had our mutual reinforcing activities. So we as the Bridge organization were working with the churches in a zip code. The counties were doing some marketing. Another organization was having a carnival. And so you'd think that we would accomplish this goal. We were just going by zip codes, but we didn't. So where did we go wrong? Well, first of all, we had a shared measurement, but we had no shared way of tracking it. So that was our first problem. We just didn't have a way to communicate success or failure. We just didn't know. And then I realized after a while, I wasn't the only one that was kind of like embarrassed about our progress. It wasn't going all that well. And at meetings, I would just say, yeah, we're working on that. It takes time to build relationships with churches. And we were just getting from a lot of churches, no, we don't want to be involved in the child welfare system, or no, our church is doing this. And we only had like one church in each of the zip codes we were working with. But what I found out is we're having regular communication, but it wasn't very honest. All of us were having the same struggles. Instead of being vulnerable and honest, we failed, quite honestly, and we're still working on it. I think that communication piece, that's got to be honest communication. You have to share your successes, but you also have to just as readily share your challenges. And then the last point is to have a backbone support organization. You know what? In this case, it wasn't us. It was the state. They were organizing it. So in this case, we needed to collaborate by joining their efforts. In other things, sometimes we've been the backbone organization. And I think we might have some disagreement here, but I think it's just as important to be the backbone, but it's just as important to join the backbone. You don't always have to be the leader in collaboration. Sometimes we need to join others. So, until there's more than enough. In his book, Jason has this proverb I love. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Go together with. When it comes to more than enough, a couple of trees in the middle of the savannah is not going to get the job done. You working by yourself, me working by myself, you working by yourself, autonomous activity is not going to get the job done. We need collaboration. We need that diverse, integrated ecosystem in our communities and in our state, and really with this movement in our nation, so there can be more than enough.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you so much. All right. So next we're going to invite Philip Pattison to come up from Foster the City. He is in the Bay Area. Lest you think that, church-state partnership, I'm sure that works great in the South. I'm sure it doesn't work in places like the Bay Area of California. Philip's here to tell us it does. So Philip, going to talk about tactics versus vision.
Well, it's so good to be here. It's good to see you all. As Jason said, my name is Philip Pattison, and I am the Executive Director of Foster the City. And yeah, as Jason just said, we're going to talk a little bit for just a few minutes about the difference between a tactics-based approach in our foster care movement versus a vision-driven approach. Okay, so it's the difference between your movement being driven by random activities and cool opportunities that happen to come your way versus a laser-focused, clearly defined, get you out of bed in the morning, North Star type of vision. Okay, and obviously we're going to choose the latter. Now, I'm not here today to tell you to get a vision. I don't know most of you, but I do know you probably have a vision already. That's why you're here at CAFO, is because you have goals and dreams and ambitions and hopes for the kids and the families and the churches in your area. I think the question we should ask for just a couple of minutes is, what role does our vision play in the day-to-day activities of our foster care movements? Okay, is our vision for our kids and families in our communities, is it ink on a page? Or is it ones and zeros, or is it actually, the driving force behind where we're going and how we get there? Okay, so I want to share very quickly 3 quick benefits in choosing that laser-focused, vision-based approach. And the first benefit is this: vision gives us focus to our activities. It gives us focus in our activities. So about 6 years ago, I was pastoring a small church in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my church got involved in foster care. We began to build relationships with social workers, as Jason was saying. And at one point, a social worker sat us down and said, "Hey, we like partnering with you and all, but right now we're in a crisis. There are more kids coming into foster care today in the Bay Area than there are homes that are ready for them. We're in a crisis, and it's just a little bit bigger than your church." He said, "Do you think that there are churches around you that would want to link arms together and help us address this crisis?" When we began to look around, we realized a big reason why that was happening, why there was a deficit of foster homes, is because retention of foster parents is abysmally low. Most of you are aware, about half of foster parents won't make it past their first placement. We found that something that changes that is if they take that journey, their fostering journey, in the context of community. So this social worker asked us, would you create a faith alliance of churches to help us address this crisis? And so we walked out of that meeting back in February of 2015, and we had our vision. She gave it to us. We were going to help mobilize churches to raise up foster families and support friends until there were more than enough loving homes to meet the need. That was going to be our driving force. That was where we were headed. Now, we weren't going to do donations. We weren't going to do big events. We weren't going to do support groups. We weren't going to do trauma-informed training. We weren't going to do parents' night out. We weren't going to do mentoring. All of those things are incredible. A lot of you do those things. A lot of those things are so incredibly important. They're so meaningful. But in the Bay Area, there were already people doing it. There were already great organizations that were doing those things and doing them really well. Here was the gap that we could step into and fill. And so we decided we're going to focus all of our attention on this one specific vision. This was our lane. As he was talking about everybody finding their place and working together, this was going to be our lane that we focused on. And so we one of our mantras became, we're laser focused. We're going to choose lasers over flashlights. So all of our intensity, all of our energy is going to go into one single point so that we can have a greater impact. That was going to be a defining part of who we were. Now, if you've been at this for a little while, you'll know that the more time goes by, the harder it is to stay laser focused. One of the books that really helped to shape our thinking around this was by a guy named Greg McKeown. I always pronounce his, I'm sure I'm butchering his name every time I say it, but he wrote a book called Essentialism. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it, Essentialism. And this is basically, one of the points he makes in the book is this. Oftentimes, organizations, companies, they will start with a laser-focused vision. They start with a clearly defined vision and mission. And because of that, they oftentimes get traction. They gain traction and momentum and credibility, and what happens as a result of that is they start to get opportunities to come their way. People come to them and say, "Wow, you guys are doing well. Have you thought about doing this too? Hey, what if we tried this?" And guys, good opportunities, we all know, they're really hard to say no to, aren't they? And so what so often happens is these organizations, these movements, start to add activities, one after another. And if you're not careful, it begins to dilute the mission. There's mission drift. You begin to dilute the very impact that brought those opportunities to them in the first place. And so I'm actually going to ask my friend Ryan to come up here. I was going to put this on a wall. Ryan's going to be my wall here. Everybody say hi, Ryan. So this is Ryan. Ryan leads all of our efforts in Southern California. So Ryan, can you hold that up nice and tall? You guys can see this? Everybody kind of move around. There we go. All right, listen. Greg McKeown in his book gave this illustration, and it's just so simple, so obvious. You guys are going to shake your head in a minute, but this changed my life. This illustration literally changed my life, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, this circle right here, that represents your organization, your movement. Okay, this line right here, that represents the totality of your capacity as an organization. Your time, your resources, your staffing, everything that you can do is right here. Okay, so this is your organization, and that's you. Now, let's imagine for a second. Go ahead and flip that, please, Ryan. All right, we didn't practice this. I did this a few minutes ago over here. All right, all right. So let's say you recruit foster families and support friends. You do mentoring. You do trauma-informed training. You can do donations. You can do big events. And honestly, the list could go on and on and on and on and on. This is a little overly simplistic, granted, but this is about how much you're going to get done. Ryan, would you mind flipping that for me? This is about how much you're going to get done with your organization. About that much. Okay? I know I said it's a little overly simplistic, but stay with me. Doing okay? All right. All right. So that's about how much you're going to get accomplished. Now, this is not just true for organizations, that's also true for individuals, isn't it? That's been true of me in different seasons of my life. I have that little church that I was pastoring that helped launch Foster the City 6 years ago. We merged with another church. I became a campus pastor. I was overseeing our local outreach, our global outreach. I oversaw all of our church planting, and also led this growing coalition called Foster the Bay, which became Foster the City today. Okay, I was doing all these things. I can't tell you how many nights I would go to sleep at night, and I would say, I would put my head down on the pillow, worked my tail off that day, and felt like I had gotten nothing done. Have you been in that place before? Okay, that's true of individuals, it's true of organizations. Now, one of the greatest decisions that I made, partly from this illustration, was I quit being a campus pastor, a local outreach, global outreach, and church planting, and I just decided I'm going to focus full time on Foster the City. And as an organization, I said, we're not going to do all these things. We're going to try to just stay focused in our lane. We're going to let our vision be what drives us forward. And guess what happens is you don't get that much done. Ryan, go ahead and flip that for me. And flip it 2 times, if you will, because we're out of time. There we go. That's what you get done. That's it right there. That's what you get done. You can go further faster if you focus your efforts. You follow me? Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Can we give it up for Ryan? All right. Okay. All right. I got 2 quick minutes. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the second point, and then we're going to call it a day for me. All right. Listen. So vision gives you focus in your activities. You know what it also does? It gives you the ability to measure your impact. It gives you the ability to measure your progress. If you don't have a defined destination, how do you know how far you've come? If you don't have a clearly defined vision, how do you know if you're getting anywhere? Okay, I've gone back and forth over whether or not I should share this with you. This is probably what I should have cut right here, because honestly, this makes me look a little bit shallow. You're probably going to think a little bit less of me after I say it, but I think it's worth mentioning. Okay, everybody wants to be on a winning team. Okay, everybody wants to be on a team that's winning. I live in the Bay Area. I didn't become a Golden State Warriors fan until 2015-16 when Steph Curry took them to the championship. Okay. I became a San Francisco 49ers fan in 2019 when Jimmy Garoppolo took him to the Super Bowl. I don't even like baseball. I've watched more baseball this year than I ever have in the past. You know why? Because the Giants are winning this year. The San Francisco Giants, I know you all think less of me, because the San Francisco Giants are crushing it, and it's super fun. It's exciting. I felt more connected to this team in the Bay Area than I ever have before. You know why? Because we're winning. Like, listen, the agencies you partner with, the churches that you're partnering with, the families that you're serving, that your staff member, your team, they need to know that they're winning. They need to know that they're making progress. But if you don't have a clearly defined vision, a laser-focused vision, how do you know if you're getting anywhere? I've heard it said like this, that imagine you go bowling, right? I can't remember where I read this, but it's you go to a bowling alley, you go to this bowling lane, but in this specific bowling alley, they have a curtain that comes in halfway down the bowling lane, right? So you can't see. You can roll the ball, but you can't see what happens on the other side of it. So you might come to this bowling lane, and you might, it's fun to roll the ball down the lane. So you might, a few times, roll the ball down there. But chances are you're going to get bored after a little while. You know why? Because unless you can start to see pins being knocked down, you're going to lose all motivation. Your team needs to see that pins are being knocked down. The agencies and the churches that you're serving, they need to see pins being knocked down. They need to know what progress looks like. But if you don't have a defined destination, how can you know if there is truly progress? Okay, for Foster the City, that means with every church we partner with, we visit foster families and support friends. That's what progress looks like. On a macro level, for us, that means reducing percentage year over year, how many kids are being sent out of county. Like Shelly just talked about, how many kids are being sent out of county due to a shortage of foster homes. Year over year, we want to see that percentage dropped when it's zero, where kids don't need to be sent out of their homes anymore because there's more than enough. I could keep going. Thank you again so much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Philip. Guys, awesome. All right. I'm now going to introduce you to Lori Courier. Hey, Lori. Lori is with the call in Arkansas, and she has been doing such great work. They have a team. They are all over the place, all over the state, doing such good work. And she's going to be talking about adjustment versus change. All right.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, so I'm not going to lie, like every person speaking tonight is very passionate about the work that they do, and when I got my instructions for this breakout session, I was assigned to talk about adjustment versus change, and a little question mark was floating above my head, like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And it reminded me of being a middle school teacher, and fancy that, guess where we are tonight? We're in a middle school, right? And so I thought, well, monitor and adjust. That's the whole teacher thing, right? If something is not working right, you monitor and adjust. But we didn't really account for change. Like sometimes we had to change our whole lesson plan to get through to our kids, right? It wasn't enough just to adjust a little bit. Like we had to start over from the beginning. It happened to me a lot. It wasn't because I was a bad teacher. But I got to really thinking about what's the difference between adjustment and change. Well, change is really about transformation, and adjustment is really about tweaking or editing something. And I'm an English major, so I like to edit a lot of stuff. So our initial intentions when we launched the call, we just approached the agency and we said, hey, there's a group of Christians over here that might like to get together with you people at the state and see if we can do something to help you. And they all kind of went, and then they said, well, we're not sure because the church has been here before, and they said they wanted to help, and then it got hard and they disappeared. And we said, we're not going to do that to you. And so that is evidence of change, right? You got some people who really want to make a difference. So let's just talk a little bit about the struggles that were going on at the agency that caused us to go forward and visit with them and negotiate, if you will, build trust in how we are going to hopefully try to help them. So what are the primary structures that were struggling when we arrived at that meeting the first time and said we'd like to help? Well, foster family recruitment, adoptive family recruitment. Basically, it didn't exist. It was really not assigned to anyone. It was certainly not assigned to anyone who had the capacity to do any recruitment efforts. They had not been trained in how to recruit families, and they didn't, frankly, have the time because, as you know from working with child welfare systems, people are usually in crisis mode, and something is always falling off the to-do list, which is fine because we need to be focusing on taking care of kids. There was no bridge for involvement of the church. So there was no way for the church really to connect with the state agency, and we really wanted to fix that because we knew there was a lot of capacity in the church to take care of, excuse me, I'm getting a phone call, to take care of kids. One of the things that we found out when we talked to some people in the church who are foster families is like, oh, the process is laborious to become a foster family. And like, okay, well, what are some of the things that we can do to make that better? Those were some of the barriers that we addressed. The length of the training was an issue. The disorganization, or at least that was the perception of some foster parents, like it really wasn't clear what were the things that I needed to do to become a foster parent. It's like, well, you turn one thing in and then you wait for that to come back, and then you do the next thing and then you wait for that to come back. And so it just really wasn't clear. And I'm speaking of the whole process of becoming a foster parent, including training. And I don't know about your experience with foster care training, but in Arkansas, we had one training provider for prospective foster families. And their approach to getting families who had been recruited into a training program was to wait until they had enough people on a sign-up list, and then decide that when they were going to have a training, and then send a letter saying in 2 weeks that training is going to start. And that's not highly effective for really busy families. And so they were not really successful at getting more people into training. And their training didn't happen very often, and training was 10 weeks. So those were some of the barriers that we were facing. Well, the state decided, yeah, we want to listen to what you have to say, and we want to try to pay attention to what the needs are for foster families, because we really do want to get some foster families. And so they said, okay, well, we trust you since you said you're going to stay here and you're going to work with us and you're going to follow through. And so let's sit at the table and think about what are the innovations that we can do, what are the out-of-the-box ideas that we have to make life better for prospective foster families and for those who are working with the state, and explore ways to move those barriers that I talked about. Basically, speed up the process, but not give up quality, because quality is important, right? So we got started, and lo and behold, do you know when you go out to churches and you say, hey, you know that verse in the Bible, James 1:27, that calls Christians to care for vulnerable children? Well, we're here to talk to you about that, and we'd like for you to be able to share that with your church, because we're forming a ministry, and we like to call Christians up to care for vulnerable kids in their homes, and because it says that in the Bible, right? And so they said, oh, yeah. That's important stuff. So how can we help? And it was actually an amazing response. And then before too long, 100 churches in one county, Pulaski County, which is Little Rock, Arkansas, which is the capital of Arkansas, we had 100 churches who had expressed interest and said, yeah, we want to do that. That was the first time that the agency had ever seen so much involvement from the church in our state. And they were kind of blew their minds a little bit. So anyway, so we called up the church, and then we realized, oh goodness, we've created all this interest, and now what do we do? And so, we didn't come out of the gate with any kind of serious plan. We're just going to try this thing out and see how it works. And then we began to put some structure around it. We realized, oh, we have 25 families who are interested in becoming foster families. That's awesome. And so we started kind of building some structure around that. Mainly around training to start with. And so we said, well, hey, what about if we shorten the training so people would be super interested in coming to it? And what if we did it on a weekend? Well, that's a novel idea. Can we do that? Yeah, it doesn't say in the law book anywhere that we can't do that. Well, who would we get to do that? Well, how about some volunteers, some qualified volunteers, some people who train for a living, like teachers or trainers for big corporations or people like that. All those people show up to church on Sunday, right? And so that's what we did. We started recruiting trainers, and then we sent them over to training with our DCFS partner, and then we created a training system that was 2 weekends, long weekends, I might add. And so we were getting those families signed up, getting them to training, and they were happy, and it was fantastic, and checking my time. And so it was highly successful. And the next thing you know, every month we're having a training, and it's full. Full is 20. Over full is 25 or 26, depending on the situation. And so we were really moving families through the process. I have to be honest and say, when I started with the call in 2008, my first job was to work with the families. We had 25 families in the process, and a lot of them had already gone to training, and they were just kind of stalled. And we're like, what? How do we move them along? And so I sat down with our liaison, who now works for the call. And I said, how are we going to move these people along? Let's figure out what the certification process is. Like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. We literally made like a little list, check boxes and the whole thing. And we started giving that to families. And we found out pretty soon after they started turning their paperwork in that paperwork was getting lost. And we're like, oh no, we have to fix that too. And so we bought a red folder. We literally call it the red folder still. And we said, well, families, all that stuff on the checklist, put it in this folder and hold on to the folder until it's timed, it's finished. And then we'll turn it in. And that'll keep us from losing paperwork. So really the whole thing was about solving problems. And it was about doing that cooperatively. And in the context of a really great relationship, right? One where there's trust, one where there's honesty, where we say, okay, well, we're not really sure how this is going to work, but let's give it a try, right? So eventually we got around to saying that we have a problem because we can't get enough trainers now. We're spreading to, what the call is now in 54 counties across Arkansas. So in spreading to other counties, that reduced our capacity to have volunteer trainers. And so we pitched an idea to the agency that they would allow us to train our own trainers. And miraculously, they said, we trust you and we think that's a good idea, especially with this great plan that you've put out for us. And so I think that the whole adjustment versus change thing is we could have taken that approach and just made little tweaks here and there, in partnership with DCFS, but that's not what happened. It was because of that trusting, collaborative, honest, authentic relationship that we had with DCFS that we were able to accomplish some of those things. It was because of DCFS's willingness to sit at the table and say, we value your opinion, and you give us feedback on what your families are experiencing, because we want to use that to improve our systems and our processes. And we're going to do this in partnership with you. We're going to do it with each other. We're going to change together, not just adjust, not just monitor and adjust. We're going to do it together. And I think that is one of the keys to these partnerships, to bridge organizations, to foster care movement, hugely important, not to be undervalued. So I commend you for being here, and thank you for your attention, and I'll be praying for all of you as you are creating foster care movement where you are.
Thank you, Lori. Hey, I want to draw your attention to the third point up there. Y'all, that's not a typo. 60% of active foster families, excluding relative caregivers in Arkansas, were recruited by the call through the local church. Amen. There they are. All right. All right. I am so happy to introduce you to Dr. Sharon Ford, who has been such a light and a mentor inside the child welfare system for many years in the state of Colorado, and then beyond that, now leads the effort at Focus on the Family in adoption and orphan care and foster care. And so we are delighted to have Dr. Ford with us. She's a good friend, and it's always good to see her. And it's been a minute.
It has. Today
All
we
right.
get to be with each other.
That's right. There you go. Agency-led programming versus community-led advocacy. Welcome, Dr. Ford.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. It's my pleasure and honor to be with you here today, with you. Amen. God has seen fit to provide for all of us to have weathered some storms over the last 18, 20 months, but he's still in control. He's still in control. And I remind myself of that whenever things get hard. And being in state government, for part of my career, things got hard because government tried to do things by themselves. When you think you know it all, can do it all, that you don't need anybody, that you can do it by yourself, things get real hard quickly. It gets hard for your staff. It gets hard for the children and the families that you think you're serving. It just gets hard. By the way, if you haven't gotten this book, until there's more than enough, by the way, by Jason Weber. Please go out and buy this book. I think it's in the bookstore. He didn't ask me to pitch it. I'm pitching it because it's a good read. It's got good information in it. And the information that you're hearing from us today partially is in this book, but it also has other information that I think that would be beneficial to you as you continue to do the work that God has called you all to do. One of the things that I wanted to share with you about agency-led versus community-led is that we do have to keep our eyes on the prize. Our eyes on the prize, as Philip said, that laser focus. And I can tell you one of the things that government always has, their laser focus is about child safety. Every state government office has child protection, whether it's a state office or the county office. Child protection is the office that has most of the FTEs assigned to it. When it comes to recruitment and retention of foster care, but they don't even say retention of foster care so much. They said the recruitment of foster homes. Oh, and by the way, yes, even the recruitment of adoptive homes, but that's because the federal law and their state law says you have to do this recruitment piece, because if you take kids into custody, you have to have somewhere to place them. But more importantly, before you ever get to that place of recruitment, you have to get to that place of child safety, because child safety takes you to a place from saving the children from being abused and neglected in your homes to now keeping them safe somewhere else. And so that safety piece somewhere else is about recruiting families. And when you think about the Families First Act now, it says, oh no, not in residential care, not in psychiatric care, not in group care, but in family foster care. Family, the most natural place for where children should grow up and be raised. And yes, by the same token, the eye on the prize for government is also about returning kids back home, reunification. And so government doesn't take kids to hold on to them, even though the data shows that kids stay in care long periods of time. The goal is to return those children home. And so going in and having a conversation with state government and local government shouldn't be just about, oh, we want to raise up family foster homes for you. We want to raise up adoptive families for the children whose parental rights have been terminated. But we also want to help raise up quality foster families who will love on the children and love on their birth families so that they can go home again. Because if no one knows about redemption, the body of Christ knows that message, can preach it, seen the commercials, seen the reruns, amen, and we're reminded of that every day as we walk our lives, right? And so here's the agency has its job, but the community has its job, and I'm talking about the church community has a job to do what the Bible has commanded that we should do, is to love on our brothers and sisters as we love ourselves, that we love with. And even when government is prickly and government is hard to love, we have, as children of the Most High King, an opportunity to do what God has asked us to do, commanded us to do, is to be kind and to love state government, caseworkers, social workers, case managers, and all those other government officials in between who interact with the court system. Love them too, because we all are called to do a work to take care of God's precious children. And we can only do it if we do it together. Agency-led, government, you know, is agency-led. Government's all about activity. If you've ever read the state 4B state plan or the Families First Act plan, every state is required to identify the activities that they are doing to do all the things that the federal government says it's supposed to do. But government can't do those activities in and of themselves, and so they make it a competitive process by giving out this contract here, giving out this grant here, negotiating with this organization over here to do the work. One of the things I can say about Project 127, when they very first started, they made the decision to not take government funds. And I know that there are many of you in here, maybe you've got a government contract and you say, well, that's how we got to be able to do our work. We needed that money. Maybe 80% of the money is federal money or state money, and 20% of it is you do fundraising events for that money. But when you can be pure and not take federal funds or state funds, it changes the dynamics of what you can do and how you do your work, okay? And Project 127 is one example of that. Lori, are you like that still? No federal, no state funds? It changes the dynamics. It takes you from being a competitor to a servant. Serving God's children. And that means, when I say children, I don't mean just the little ones that, you know, in the foster home or in the birth home. I'm talking about the serving a caseworker, serving that administrator. When you talk about you're dealing with people who have prickly attitudes, people who don't appreciate you, don't want you in the room, you can go in there as a child of the Most High King and love on that person and sit at the table and be in that meeting and pray for them all through the meeting until God breaks that situation. He brings healing to that group of people till their no stops being no until, well, I don't know, or maybe, until it can change to a yes. And then God gets the increase, and there's an amen. So you break that situation from being a competitive model. Recruiting is an add-on piece of work for state government. Government doesn't want to recruit foster families. They only have to do it because of that child safety thing. And so they don't do a good job. They do a job at it, but they don't do a good job. Because who can best talk to another family about being family? Government's talking to you about being family? Really? Get out of my business. No, but a family can talk to a family about being family. The church can talk to the church. You ever been to a conference where judges are in the room? Judges are talking to judges. Lawyers are talking to lawyers. Families talk to families. Churches talk to churches. So when Pastor Jelena said, I'll go and I'll talk to all these pastors, I'll knock on the door and talk to them about the church standing up and making a difference. Oh, Jesus. The clock. That changed the dynamics about recruitment. It changes the dynamics from when it's government-led agency, competitor-led. This agency has a contract, this agency has a contract, these people want some of the money, they don't know how to get in, to being church-led, community-led, respect, dignity, trust building, relationship building, that all make the difference. What would cause a pastor to leave being the pastor of a church, to go to refocus his energy only because God directed him to do so? Foster the Bay to foster the city. Okay, the Bay is this big, the city is this bigger. Still pastoring, following the lead of God to do the work of God, to make a difference in the lives of children and families, not being a competitor, not being an agency, but being the community, the church community, loving on the people, all the people, big people, little people. So it's the community-led situation is positioning for success. It is local engagement, that knocking on the door, that having that cup of coffee, breaking bread, listening, crying. Boy, when you can sit at a table and weep for that person, honestly, sincerely, loving them, understanding them, helping and wanting them to grow and be successful, that builds a level of trust that when things get hard, and they will get hard, that you're able to push past that hard situation to a place of success and healing. It is so empowering when we can go somewhere together with each other. We're not standing alone. We're not standing as on one side of the platform and you on the other side of the platform. We're with each other, coming to advocate on behalf of what's most needed. The system of child welfare needs change, but it needs you to be the change agent on behalf of them. As a former worker, I could not go to the legislature and advocate for anything. I could educate a legislator about a situation, but I couldn't advocate I needed to stay in my place. You have a place of empowerment. Your voice is there to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. They need you. The children need you. The caseworkers need you. The administrators need you to be the church in this moment. When you recruit, you're not just recruiting for a foster family. You're recruiting for change as change agents, getting movement on behalf of the children. Outcomes. It changed. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Outcomes. Joint ownership. When you celebrate together. It's not I did something, my organization. It's we did it together. Because see, you need the numbers, you need the data from state government. They have custody of the children. You went and worked with the church, you worked with those in the community, you did the fundraising, you got all these people to put things together, the knapsacks, the backpacks, whatever it was, you did it together. So celebrate together. Don't separate from each other. Go and be with each other. And when state government has a catastrophe, and they have them, weep and mourn with them. Support them. Because see, when you're down, when you're with somebody when they're down, they'll remember when they're back up again. Okay? And God gets the glory. Be creative. Always be solution focused. Have a purpose for what you're doing. Don't just do something just vicariously. Bad things happen sometimes when you just vicariously do things. So be strategic. And the total benefit of that is that children will be with families. With families. And our families need support. Birth families need support. Kinship families need support. All families need support. And who better to do that than the people who know and love the Lord? Thank you today.
Nobody's complaining about Dr. Sharon Ford talking. We could listen to her all night long. You can get the recording from today, and you can just listen to it when you wake up in the morning, and you'll be ready every day. So good. Thank you, Dr. Ford. Thank you. All right, and then the last one is just more versus more than enough. You know, we don't serve a God of not enough. We don't serve a God of just enough. We serve a God of more than enough. When the people of Israel were wandering around in the desert and they were hungry, when God provided manna, he didn't provide not enough. He didn't provide just enough. He provided more than enough. When Jesus decided to feed lunch to 5,000 people on a hillside, he had a few loaves and fish. Didn't provide not enough, didn't provide just enough. He provided more than enough. We believe that that's the same God who loves the children and families in your neighborhood, in your community. And we believe that he desires through his church not to provide not enough, not to provide just enough, but to provide more than enough. So we have just a few minutes left. And I want to give you guys a chance. We can probably take a couple of questions. I'm going to ask our folks to come on up. Philip, if you could grab that stool that's just like these up here as well on your way. And while they're coming up, I want to make a couple of announcements. Tomorrow at lunchtime, you grab your box lunch where you'd normally grab it, bring it up to the Healing Center, which is right next door, next building over. We're going to have a special More Than Enough lunch where we're going to talk about some brand new, exciting things, some tools that can help you do this kind of work in your community. We've got a few different things brewing. We'd love to tell you about it. So please come for lunch tomorrow. Right over here across, if you come out these doors and go through the basketball cages that are out here, don't hurt yourself going through those things, but if you go through the cages, on the other side is the More Than Enough lounge. That space is set up for you. If you have meetings that you want to have, there's couches in there, it's comfy. There's a charging station for your phone or your computer, so you can go in there, hang out. There are resources in there. There's some More Than Enough sweatshirts, things like that as well, but it's a place for you. I know I'm going to set up some meetings and have them in there and just be around and connect there as well. So we'd love to have you do that. All right, so we have time to take a few questions. If you have one, I'm going to ask you to stand up, ask the question. I'm going to repeat it for the recording, and then we're going to hand you guys the mic to answer it. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Okay, when an organization is going to the county, who should they try to talk to and how should they talk to them? Dr. Ford.
That's a really good question. I believe in bottom up versus top down. Workers really get challenged when they hear from their top administration that this person in the community came and said da 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 da. And so now we have to do something, versus you building relationship with someone who's at a lower level in the county and having that person talk up. Boy, I met so-and-so and so-and-so and they're doing da-da-da, and can we have them come and speak to our team for a unit meeting or something? And that you're building relationship from underneath, and then that administrator's like, gosh, I'm hearing all these good things about this organization. Maybe we should, connect with them. And so it makes such a significant difference. Now, if you've got a leader, however, in a county, and that leader is, brand new or just has a heart for this, and there's an open door, don't ever miss an opportunity to open, to walk through an open door. If it's open, you go ahead and walk through it, honey, and God will do the rest.
That's good. Thank you. Other questions? The lights are kind of bright, so you might have to holler. I can't see everybody. Yeah. So, what's the hierarchy look like? What do the titles look like in a county or a state system?
Sure. I think that first of all, not every state is run the same way. Most of the states' child welfare systems are state operated. Only a few states have a county operated system. California, New York, Colorado. We are all county based systems, meaning that all the child welfare work happens in the county level, and the state oversees the county. Okay, but those systems where they're state run, those titles are like the state child welfare director, the state behavioral health director, the state foster care manager, the state adoption manager, or the state, my title was the state permanency manager. In county systems, there's the county director. There's the assistant county director. There's the foster care coordinator. There's the adoption team. And so sometimes those are called leads. So every system has its own titles for people. And if you Googled your state government and looked at child welfare, you'll see some of the titles of those people so that you would know what their names are. Boy, it's so important to do your homework, and so that's a great question for you to have asked. Having some of that information and some of the jargon that child welfare uses. Boy, if you could go look at the acronyms, that alphabet soup, and learn some of that jargon, I think it would be so beneficial. Because state just kind of just rolls off your tongue when you start having conversations with people, so you don't want to be lost in what that conversation is. But the other thing is to ask them, say, you're using terms I don't know, helps to slow them down and make them think that if they really want to partner with you, they'll slow down and share what that language means with you.
Yeah, that's really good, and it gives you an opportunity to demonstrate a teachable spirit, right? And it's one of the problems is that when we come in and we act like, hey, you've got problems, we got solutions, but when you come asking questions, it's very clear. You're saying, I don't know the answers. I'm just here to ask questions. I'm here to help. So that's good. That's good. All right. Well, we have just 2 minutes left. I'm gonna let's do one more. Yeah. Philip. So the question really is, do you start an organization doing this work, or do you just coordinate with existing organizations and pull folks together? All right.
I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, talking about the everyone wants to be on a team that's winning. It really is about everyone wants to be on a team that's making progress, not necessarily beating someone else, but rather making progress. So I'm glad we clarified that even. You know, I think every situation is different. I don't think there's always a yes and always a no. I will say, though, that if there's an organization, if there's a movement happening that's addressing a specific area that you can throw a fuel on the fire of what they're doing, I think that's a great first option. And I think if it's not connected to that organization, it's maybe identifying maybe some gaps that aren't being met right now in your area. But anybody else have?
Usually when we have these conversations or these questions come up, we always recommend looking around in your community to see what is already working in your community, and then finding a place to plug into that or to adjust so that there's no replication or duplication of services in your community.
I was just going to say, always take a posture of learning. You know, whether you're getting to know your county or you're trying to find out what's going on, just that curiosity. I want to know what you're doing. They'll feel like a winner just because you went and asked.
So good. So good. Well, let's thank our guests here. Guys, this is great. Two quick things. For more things, I mean, there's more. Just look in your programs, look on the app for more than enough related things. There's great presenters all week long on these things. As you move towards home at the end of the week, and even while you're here, be sure to visit morethanenoughtogether.org. That's morethanenoughtogether.org. Lots of resources there. And then if you would take a few minutes to fill out the survey right here, and this is. Until There's More Than Enough workshop, and give us some feedback. That would be great. Thank you so much. Have a great dinner. We'll see you tonight.